Is this supposed to be a history presentation or a creative writing exercise, Lily? Mr. Henderson asked, his voice dripping with a condescension that seemed to lower the temperature in the bustling fourth-grade classroom. He stood near the whiteboard, arms crossed over a cheap polyester tie, tapping a red marker against his bicep. The sound was rhythmic and irritating, like a dripping faucet in a quiet house. Lily, 10 years old and trembling in her scuffed sneakers, tightened her grip on the edge of her grandfather's sleeve. Beside her sat Roger Clayton. He was 82 years old, shrinking into the frame of a man who had once been larger than life. He wore a red tweed jacket that had seen better decades, the fabric fraying slightly at the cuffs, and a pair of brown slacks that bunched around his ankles. His hands, spotted with age and tremors, rested atop a simple wooden cane. He looked like a man who spent his days feeding pigeons in the park, not changing the course of history. "It is history, Mr. Henderson," Lily said, though her voice barely carried over the hum of the ventilation system. "My pop-pop was a frogman. He was in the teams before they were even famous." A ripple of snickers moved through the room. Children, cruel in their ignorance, mirrored the attitude of their authority figure. A boy in the back row whispered something about a frog, and a girl near the window giggled, covering her mouth. Mr. Henderson sighed, a long, drawn-out exhalation that signaled his patience was at an end. "Lily, look at him." He checked his wristwatch, making a show of how much time they were wasting. "I have a syllabus to get through. We have state testing next week. I appreciate that you love your grandfather, and I am sure he was a very nice mailman or clerk or whatever he actually did. But the Navy SEALs, that is a serious organization. They are elite warriors. They do not sit in fourth-grade classrooms wearing moth-eaten jackets that look like they came from a thrift store bargain bin." Roger shifted in the small plastic chair that was far too low for his bad hips. He did not look at the teacher. His eyes, a pale watery blue, were fixed on the American flag hanging limply in the corner of the room. He blinked slowly, his breathing even and deep, the only calm thing in a room rapidly filling with second-hand embarrassment. "He is not a liar," Lily said, her voice cracking. Tears pricked the corners of her eyes, hot and stinging. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a crinkled photograph. It was black and white, showing a group of shirtless men on a beach, their faces smeared with mud, holding rifles that looked like toys compared to the muscles on their arms. She tried to hold it up, but her hand shook so badly the image blurred. Mr. Henderson stepped forward and plucked the photo from her fingers with a dismissive swipe. He squinted at it, then tossed it onto the desk behind him as if it were a candy wrapper. "Blurry men on a beach," the teacher said, turning back to the class. "Anyone can download a picture from the internet, Lily. This is what I am talking about. Stolen valor is not a joke. Claiming military honors that one did not earn is disrespectful to the actual heroes who serve our country." He looked down at Roger, his expression hardening into a sneer. "Sir, I am going to have to ask you to wait in the hallway. You are disrupting the educational environment, and quite frankly, enabling this fantasy is not healthy for your granddaughter. She needs to learn to distinguish fact from fiction." Roger slowly turned his head. The movement was mechanical, stiff with arthritis, but his eyes locked onto Mr. Henderson's face. For a fleeting second, the fog of age seemed to clear, and something sharp, dangerous, and incredibly old peered out from beneath the heavy brows. It was the look of a predator that had long ago decided it had nothing left to prove to prey. "I am just here to support the girl," Roger said. His voice was like grinding gravel, low and raspy. Mr. Henderson laughed, a sharp bark of sound. "Support her by telling her the truth. Look at you. You can barely hold that cane. You expect these children to believe you were jumping out of airplanes and wrestling sharks. Please, it is embarrassing." The teacher turned to the class, seeking their validation. "Does this man look like a hero to you, or does he look like someone who forgot to take his medication this morning?" The class erupted in laughter. It was the kind of laughter that hurts, sharp and jagged. Lily dropped her head, hiding her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. She wanted to disappear. She wanted the floor to open up and swallow the red tweed jacket, the wooden cane, and the lie that she had believed was truth. Maybe the teacher was right. Maybe Pop-Pop was just confused. Maybe the stories about the jungles and the dark water were just bedtime tales, no more real than dragons or wizards. Roger did not shrink. He did not defend himself. He simply reached out a trembling hand and placed it gently on Lily's shoulder. The weight of his hand was heavy, grounding. He patted her twice, a silent code they had shared since she was a baby. "I am here. You are safe." But the humiliation was not over. Mr. Henderson was enjoying his moment of superiority. He felt powerful, the guardian of truth, exposing a fraud in front of his impressionable audience. He did not notice the man sitting in the very back of the room near the cubbies. The man in the back was a parent, there to pick up his son for a dentist appointment. His name was Jim Miller, and unlike Mr. Henderson, Jim had spent 6 years in the Marine Corps. He had been watching the scene unfold with a growing sense of unease that churned in his gut like spoiled milk. He hadn't paid much attention to the old man at first, just another grandparent on career day. But when Roger had turned his head, when that flash of steel had appeared in his eyes, Jim had felt a jolt of electricity run down his spine. Jim recognized that look. He had seen it on sergeants major who had survived Fallujah. He had seen it on men who carried the weight of things that could not be spoken about in polite society. Jim narrowed his eyes, focusing on the red tweed jacket. It was an odd choice, but then his gaze drifted to the lapel. Buried in the thick, fuzzy fabric of the tweed, almost invisible unless you were looking for it, was a tiny pin. It wasn't shiny. It was blackened metal, no larger than a dime. A chill went through Jim. He squinted, leaning forward. The shape was unmistakable to anyone who had served in the special operations community. It was a trident, but not the modern shiny gold Budweiser eagle everyone knew from the movies. It was the old design, the one from the genesis of the teams, the one worn by the plank owners, the founding fathers. And then the name clicked. Lily had said Clayton, Roger Clayton. Jim's breath hitched. He pulled his phone from his pocket, his thumbs flying across the screen. He typed a name into a search engine, though he didn't really need to. The results confirmed what his gut already knew. Roger the Reaper Clayton, Vietnam, Panama, classified operations in places that didn't exist on maps. A living legend. A ghost story told to Bud's candidates to make them run faster. And here he was, being dressed down by a man whose biggest conflict was a jammed photocopier. Jim didn't intervene. Not yet. He knew that if he stood up and shouted, Mr. Henderson would just dismiss him too. This required a different kind of response. This required a nuclear option. Jim exited the text app and opened his contacts. He scrolled down to a number he hadn't called in 2 years, a buddy who was currently an instructor at the Naval Amphibious Base in Coronado, just 20 minutes down the highway. He typed a message. "You are not going to believe who is getting roasted by a school teacher at Lincoln Elementary right now. Roger Clayton, the Reaper. He is sitting here taking it while some civilian mocks his service. Need immediate backup." He hit send. He watched the 3 dots appear instantly. Then the reply came. "Roger Clayton? The Roger Clayton?" Jim replied, "The one and only. Wearing a red tweed jacket. Teacher is calling him a stolen valor case. It is ugly." The response was immediate. "Do not let him leave. We are training a Tier 1 unit 3 miles away. We are rolling. Give us 10 minutes. Jim sat back, a grim smile touching his lips. He looked at Mr. Henderson, who was now lecturing the class on the importance of academic integrity. "You have no idea what is coming for you." Jim thought. "You have absolutely no idea." Back at the front of the room, the torment continued. Mr. Henderson was on a roll. He had moved on from mocking the jacket to mocking the very idea of Roger's service. "You see, class," the teacher droned, pacing back and forth. "Real soldiers carry themselves with a certain posture. They have discipline. They don't slouch. And they certainly don't tell tall tales to little girls to make themselves feel important. It is a psychological condition, really. A need for validation." Lily sobbed quietly. Roger kept his hand on her shoulder, his eyes moving from the teacher to the door, then back to the teacher. He was calculating distances. He was assessing threats. Even at 82, the programming ran deep. But he held his tongue. He had learned a long time ago that lions do not concern themselves with the opinions of sheep. However, the silence was interpreted as weakness. Mr. Henderson mistook the restraint for shame. "I think it is time for you to leave, Mr. Clayton," the teacher said, pointing to the door. "And take the cane with you. I don't want you tripping any of the students." Roger slowly began to rise. It was a painful process. His knees popped audibly. He leaned heavily on the cane, his knuckles turning white. He adjusted the red tweed jacket, buttoning the center button with shaking fingers. "I am sorry, Lily," he whispered. "I didn't mean to cause a fuss." "No, Pop," Lily cried, grabbing his hand. "Don't go, please." Mr. Henderson checked his watch again. "Go on. The principal's office is down the hall to the left. You can wait there for Lily's mother to pick you up. I'll be filing a report about this disturbance." The classroom was quiet now, the laughter having died down into an awkward, heavy silence. The children watched, sensing that something cruel was happening, even if they didn't fully understand it. Suddenly, a sound cut through the silence. It was distant at first, a low thrumming vibration that rattled the window panes in their frames. It grew louder, a rhythmic chopping sound that anyone who lived near a military base recognized instantly. But this was low. This was close. Mr. Henderson frowned and looked toward the window. "Is that a helicopter?" he asked, annoyed. The sound intensified until it felt like the roof was going to peel off. Then the distinct roar of heavy diesel engines joined the cacophony. Tires screeched in the parking lot outside. Doors slammed, heavy armored doors. Voices shouted commands. Sharp, distinct, aggressive. Mr. Henderson looked nervous. What on earth is going on? Is there a fire drill? Jim Miller in the back of the room stood up. He crossed his arms and leaned against the wall. "No drill," he said loudly. The teacher spun around. "Excuse me?" I said. "It's not a drill," Jim said, his voice calm. "You wanted to talk about real soldiers. You wanted to talk about validation. I think your lesson plan just got updated." Before the teacher could respond, the hallway outside the classroom erupted with the sound of boots. Not the shuffling of sneakers, but the heavy synchronized thud of combat boots moving with urgency. It sounded like a thunderstorm trapped indoors. The classroom door didn't just open. It was thrown wide with a force that rattled the hinges. 2 men stepped in first. They were giants. They wore full tactical gear, multicam uniforms, plate carriers loaded with magazines, drop-leg holsters and helmets with communication headsets. They carried rifles slung across their chests, barrels pointed safely at the floor but ready. Their faces were covered by balaclavas, revealing only intense scanning eyes, but they pulled them down as they entered the secure space. The class gasped. Mr. Henderson stumbled back, dropping his red marker. He looked from the men to the door, his face draining of all color. "Clear," the first operator barked. "Secure," the second replied. They stepped aside, forming a corridor. Through the door walked a man who radiated authority. He was older than the others, perhaps in his 40s, but built like a tank. He wore the same tactical gear, but his face was bare, revealing a scar that ran through his eyebrow. On his chest, a patch identified him as a Master Chief. Behind him, 6 more operators filed in. They filled the small classroom, sucking the air out of the room. They were young, fit, and terrifyingly serious. They smelled of gun oil, sweat, and ozone. They were the apex predators of the modern world. Mr. Henderson was trembling now, backed up against the whiteboard. "Who are you? You can't be in here. This is a public school." The Master Chief ignored him completely. He didn't even blink in the teacher's direction. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on the old man in the red tweed jacket standing by the student desk. The Master Chief's expression, which had been hard as granite, instantly softened into something approaching reverence. He walked straight past the teacher, past the stunned children, and stopped 3 feet from Roger Clayton. The room was so silent you could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. The Master Chief snapped to attention. His heels clicked together with a sound like a pistol shot. He brought his hand up in a crisp, razor-sharp salute. "Master Chief Clayton," he boomed. Roger looked at the man. A slow smile spread across his wrinkled face. He lifted his hand from his cane and returned the salute. It wasn't perfect. His shoulder was stiff and his hand shook, but the form was undeniable. It was the muscle memory of a lifetime. "At ease, son," Roger said. The Master Chief dropped his hand. The other 7 operators in the room immediately snapped to attention and saluted in unison. Roger nodded to them. "Good to see the trident is in good hands." The Master Chief turned to the rest of the room. He looked at Lily, who was staring with her mouth open, tears drying on her cheeks. "Is this the granddaughter?" the Master Chief asked gently. Roger nodded. "This is Lily." The Master Chief knelt down on one knee so he was eye level with her. The gear on his chest rattled. Radios, grenades, chem lights. He looked like a superhero from a movie, but he was real, and he was right there. "Lily," he said, his voice deep and kind. "My name is Master Chief Hayes. I work just down the road. We heard there was some confusion about who your grandfather is." Lily nodded mutely. Master Chief Hayes reached up to his shoulder and ripped off a patch. It was a morale patch, a skull with a trident. He pressed it into Lily's hand. "Your grandfather isn't just a SEAL, Lily. He's the reason the rest of us are here. When I was a young man just starting out, we studied his missions. We learned how to move, how to fight, and how to survive by reading his after-action reports. He is a legend. There are men walking the earth today solely because your grandfather wouldn't leave them behind." He stood up and turned slowly to face Mr. Henderson. The transition was terrifying. The kindness vanished, replaced by a cold, controlled fury. Mr. Henderson was pressing himself against the whiteboard as if trying to merge with it. I didn't know," he stammered. He doesn't look like what?" Hayes asked, taking a step closer. His voice wasn't loud, which made it worse. It was the quiet voice of a man who could end you without raising his pulse. "He doesn't look like a killer," Hayes continued. "He doesn't look like a warrior. What did you expect? Hollywood." Hayes gestured to Roger's red tweed jacket. "You see an old man in a jacket. You know what I see? I see a jacket that he wears because he spent 3 weeks in the Mekong Delta submerged in water so cold and filled with leeches that his blood temperature dropped to near fatal levels. He has nerve damage that makes him feel cold when it's 80 degrees out. That tweed keeps him warm." He pointed to the cane. "You made fun of his cane? That cane is necessary because he shattered his hip and broke both legs jumping out of a helicopter that was on fire to rescue a pilot in 1972. He walked on those broken legs for 3 miles carrying a man heavier than you." Hayes leaned in, his face inches from the teacher's. "You teach history. Then you should know that freedom isn't free. It's paid for by men like him, and the interest is paid by the pain they carry every single day. To mock him in front of his family." Hayes shook his head, disgust radiating from him. "It is beneath contempt." Mr. Henderson looked like he was going to be sick. I apologize. I truly do. I had no idea." Hayes didn't answer him. He turned back to the class. "Listen up," he addressed the children. The kids sat up straighter, eyes wide. "You are going to meet a lot of people in your lives. Some will be loud. Some will brag. Some will tell you how great they are." Hayes pointed a gloved thumb at Roger. "And some will be quiet. Some will wear old clothes and walk with canes. But never judge a book by its cover. The loudest person in the room is usually the weakest. The quietest is often the most dangerous and the most heroic. This man is a national treasure. You should be honored to breathe the same air as him." Hayes looked at Roger. "We have a vehicle outside, Master Chief. The boys were hoping you might want to come down to the base. We have some new recruits on the grinder who need to see what a real frogman looks like. We'd be honored if you and your granddaughter would join us for lunch." Roger looked at Lily. "What do you think, sweetheart? Want to skip the rest of history class?" Lily beamed, a smile so bright it lit up the room. "Yes, Pop." Roger looked at Mr. Henderson. "I trust that won't be a problem?" Mr. Henderson shook his head vigorously. No problem, not at all. Go, please." Roger began to walk toward the door. As he moved, the unit of SEALs parted for him, standing at rigid attention. As he passed each one, they murmured, "Honor to see you, sir." When Roger reached the door, he stopped and turned back to the teacher. "One more thing," Roger said. "Yes," Mr. Henderson squeaked. Roger tapped his red tweed jacket. "My wife bought me this jacket 30 years ago. She said the red made me easy to find in a crowd. I wear it because she's gone now, and it feels like a hug from her." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "It's not a costume. It's my life. Try to teach the kids a little kindness next time. It's more important than dates and names." With that, he walked out. Lily skipped beside him, clutching her patch. The squad of SEALs filed out behind them, a phalanx of modern armor protecting an ancient relic. The sound of the engines outside roared to life. The heavy doors slammed. The tires crunched on the gravel. And then the helicopter spooled up, the sound of the blades beating the air into submission as it lifted off, presumably escorting the convoy. Inside the classroom, the silence stretched on for a long time. Finally, Jim Miller, the parent in the back, stood up. He walked to the front of the room where Mr. Henderson was still slumped against the board. Jim picked up the red marker the teacher had dropped. He placed it gently on the desk. "I think that concludes the presentation," Jim said. Mr. Henderson didn't move. He stared at the empty doorway, the ghost of his own arrogance haunting him. The children looked at the empty chair where Roger had sat. It was just a plastic chair. But now, it looked like a throne. 2 hours later, at the Naval Amphibious Base, the atmosphere was electric. The mess hall had been cleared. A long table was set in the center. At the head of the table sat Roger, still in his red tweed jacket, a napkin tucked into his collar. Lily sat next to him, wearing a SEAL team ball cap that was 3 sizes too big, eating ice cream with a plastic spoon. Surrounding them were 50 of the most lethal men on the planet. They weren't eating. They were listening. "So there we were," Roger said, his voice stronger now, the raspiness smoothed out by a sip of water. No ammo, no radio, and the tide was coming in. The room was dead silent. Every eye was fixed on him. "What did you do, Master Chief?" a young lieutenant asked, leaning forward. Roger winked at Lily. "Well, I remembered I had a flare gun and a very bad attitude." The room erupted in laughter. It was a warm, respectful sound. Master Chief Hayes stood in the corner, watching. He pulled his phone out. He had received an email from the school principal. It was a formal apology, copying the superintendent. It stated that Mr. Henderson would be undergoing a mandatory sensitivity training course, and that a formal assembly would be held to honor local veterans, with an invitation for Mr. Clayton to speak if he was willing. Hayes smiled. He walked over to the table and placed a hand on Roger's shoulder. "Sir, the Admiral just called. He heard you were on deck. He's coming down." Roger waved a hand dismissively. "Tell him to wait. I'm telling my granddaughter about the time we stole the General's Jeep." Hayes chuckled. "Aye, aye, sir." Roger looked at Lily. She was glowing. She looked at him not just with love but with a new understanding. She saw the man inside the jacket. She saw the steel beneath the skin. "You know Pop, she said quietly. "What is it, kiddo?" "I think red is a cool color for a seal." Roger smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He patted the rough tweed of his sleeve. "It's the best camouflage there is, Lily. It lets you hide in plain sight." He looked around the room at the sea of young faces, the new generation of warriors who would carry the torch he had lit so many years ago. But sometimes, he whispered, more to himself than to her, sometimes it's good to be seen. As the Admiral walked in, the room snapped to attention again. But Roger just sat there, eating his soup, the king of the castle, the legend in the red tweed jacket finally, and fully vindicated. And back at Lincoln Elementary, on the whiteboard in Miss Henderson's room, someone, maybe Jim, maybe a student, had written a single sentence in red marker. "Heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear tweed." Mr. Henderson didn't erase it for a week. It was the best history lesson he had ever taught.